Did you guys know they made her into an anime? In recent years, I feel like we've seen a massive trend of increasing edginess in the magical girl genre. We used to have Sailor Moon, Cardcaptor Sakura, and others, and now we have this! Ever since Madoka Magica came out and portrayed the dark sides of the genre, it feels like with every year, more and more stories focusing on the hardships of being a magical girl have started coming out, and every addition to this catalog feels more and more degenerative. There are of course some examples of the premise executed well. One Direct Priority, if you ignore the latter half of the anime, had a lot of stuff going for it. But as a whole, it feels like the genre's image as a vanilla shoujo feel-good stories is dying out completely. And left in its place are shows focusing on the concept of high school girls being completely miserable as the main driving force for the plot. And that's especially the case with Magical Girl Side, the source of this meme. This girl right here is Aya Asagiri, the protagonist of the series. Now, I would not recommend you read the manga. It's an incredibly difficult read, both in terms of the amount of graphic content and the mess of a plot. But there is also an anime adaptation, and aside from the first episode, and especially compared to the manga, it is surprisingly decent. Aya is a regular high school girl who has problems both at school with severe bullying and at home from her brother Kanami's abuse. One day, a peculiar looking site pops up on her laptop screen showing a weird looking person. This person takes pity on Aya's misery and promises to make Aya a magical girl. Later at school, Aya finds a gown with a weird emblem that mysteriously appears in her locker. Now I know what you're probably thinking right now, this is about to be a tragical girl show, not a magical one, but hold on, it gets worse. She's soon cornered by these Roblox characters, and with nothing to lose, she fires at them. The shot causes bullies to disappear, but to her horror, she finds out that they have somehow been ran over by a train nearby. Aya feels awful because of what she's done. Moreover, she finds herself with longer hair and blood coming out of her eyes. Next day, when Aya goes back to school, she gets nearly killed by a friend of the bully she had accidentally game-ended. But at the right moment, the time stops. Aya's classmate saves her and almost game-ends the bully themselves. This is Yatsumura. She too is a magical girl. Her ability is to stop time. But her wand isn't a gun, it's a cell phone. Actually, wands are more of a definition for a class of objects given by the site's administrator to unfortunate girls like these two. The way they work is by providing supernatural abilities at the cost of truncating your lifespan. The shapes these sticks take and their powers, however, can be literally anything. These girls start to meet up and discuss two major problems. One is the fact that magical girls like them are being hunted by some magical girl hunter for their sticks. Two is that the site's main page shows a countdown until some great calamity known as Tempest is unleashed onto the earth. Okay, the show doesn't attempt to be some kind of complex narrative. It's trashy, it's edgy, but that's what makes it appealing. It's not a Michelin star meal, it's junk food and it's not even McDonald's. It's Burger King, but it still scratches a very particular kind of itch that fine cuisine can't. As the plot progresses, more and more characters get introduced and enter this chaotic web of relationships with each other. Enemies constantly change and the goals that Yatsumura and Aya pursue constantly shift. The plot itself is more like a chaotic web of motivations, but the shocking thing is it somehow remains cohesive despite numerous plot holes. At no point do you find yourself asking what the purpose or motivations of the main characters are, even if they always shift. The show doesn't really excel in other departments either. The animation quality is relatively standard for a low-budget show, but it's still very much watchable. And while its art doesn't come close to the art in the manga, that's mainly because the manga is just really beautiful. So I'm not complaining about anything, because maybe the main reason you'll be watching the show isn't animation or plot anyways, but the consistent goofy moments that you'll see throughout the anime. So there's this girl called Nijimi. She's a superstar idol, but she's also a magical girl. Her stick, underwear. What does it do? Unconditional mind control. Is it OP? Absolutely. Anyway, so she becomes friends with Aya and Yatsumura and meets Aya's brother. Now, I might be a little picky or my standards might be a little too high, but he is a 6 out of 10 at best. He is white bread as an anime character. But this is the reaction of Nijimi upon seeing him for the first time. That's right, bro's game is so good that he somehow learned to transmit Riz via Bluetooth. Now, don't get the wrong idea. The anime adaptation and the source are very different and the things they choose to focus on are polar opposites. The appeal of the show isn't seeing young girls suffer, but the complete absurdity of the things happening on the screen. The hardest part to watch is probably the first episode because of just how much pain is inflicted onto our main character. But even then, you could argue that it's portrayed in such a dramatic and obtuse way that it completely breaks your suspension of disbelief and becomes ridiculous and funny, which is a far cry from the manga, as it makes a very deliberate effort to focus on the misery and hurt of these high school girls in each chapter. It's very difficult to communicate just how much the anime changes the atmosphere of the story. It significantly restructures the plot to make it less chaotic, and the ridiculous amount of violence and graphic content from the manga was practically completely cut out. Which is why I urge you to not read the manga and instead watch the anime. Because unlike the manga, if you turn off your brain, you can be entertained by the sheer edginess on the screen while also being able to follow the dumpster fire of a story and have laughs from the Looney Tunes levels kids. But somehow, the series still managed to surprise me, as near the very end, it pulled off something incredible. In the Mob Psycho 100 fashion, our main character comes to an important realization. Being a magical girl sucks. You have to deal with all these other magical girls coming at your throat and the Tempest stuff, and yet before she became a magical girl, all she ever thought about was death. She was bullied. She was abused. Even now, she finds herself in an awful position, draining her lifespan to avoid getting killed in perhaps the most unfair battle yet. But despite all that, it is these events that allowed her to finally make friends she could never find. Out of everything she could have done at this moment, she chooses to express gratitude. She expresses gratitude towards fate for allowing her to meet Yatsumura. She thanks Yatsumura for giving her the reason to live and completely changing the way she saw herself and the world. And even though the trials she had to go through were awful and the path to meeting her was one of misery, she still considers herself lucky for being able to become friends with her. Because with Yatsumura on her side, it feels like the world itself is a little bit brighter. And no matter where they are, it feels like everything will somehow be fine. This line hit me particularly hard.
私もう自分を世界を恨まないよ。だってあなたに出会えた。
And maybe I am being a little too impressionable by being swayed by something like this, but seeing such an incredible line come out of a show like this left me with an incredibly nice, warm feeling. Eventually, these feelings culminated in the two boldly stating that yes, they went through a lot of pain and anguish. Yes, they live on the brink of death every day. And yes, they will never have the opportunity to grow old and live a healthy life. But they consider themselves neither unfortunate nor unhappy. Because it's thanks to these misfortunes that they found each other. And with each other, they are the happiest people in the entire world. And I think this is beautiful. 2 minutes later, there were implications of some hardcore yaoi action going on out of nowhere, so I was genuinely laughing my ass off. Like, 1 minute I was about to shed a tear, and next the show decided to drop the most ridiculous scene yet. So is Magical Girl Site any good? Manga? No, it's ridiculous. But the anime isn't half bad. It's still trash, but if you don't hate the magical girl genre and go into the show with the right expectations and can stomach the first episode, I think you might find watching it somewhat enjoyable. It's no masterpiece by Animetric, and most of the times you'll be entertained from the absurd stuff and logic going on the screen, but damn, I think that sequence near the end will stick with me long after the show and the meme fade into obscurity. So maybe give it a try. Turn your brains off, get over the first episode, and let yourself absorb the chaotic energy of the anime about this girl.